Hey everyone, this is Mike and today we're talking about Samurai. I wasn't the biggest fan of the job when it came out, but over the years it really grew on me, and after spending some time last expansion to actually learn how to play it well, it ended up becoming my favorite melee to play. Now with the changes that have happened with Endwalker, the other melees have become more enticing for me to play. Monk rework is fun, although I need more practice on it, because right now it requires too much brain power for me to play it right. The addition of Reaper, which is also a really fun job, and I think if they make some small changes to Ninja, then it could also be a really enjoyable job to me. And Dragoon I still need to level, but I also don't think it's changing too much, so that will still be fun to play as well. But even though I enjoy what the other jobs have to offer, I think Samurai might keep its place as my favorite melee, or at least amongst my most favorite jobs to play. They made a decent amount of changes that do have an impact, but the core feeling that the job had is still there. I feel like the changes made it easier to pick up and play Samurai, but for those that know how to play it well, all that happened is that our rotation is now slightly different, but it still feels very similar to what we used to do before. So let's just take it one thing at a time. The positional bonuses for Gecko and Kasha have been changed. Before they used to give us bonus Kenki gauge, now they give us bonus potency, so basically like all the other melees have it. This doesn't really change much. Instead of gaining the bonus damage through getting more gauge, we now gain the bonus damage straight on the GCD itself. It does make our burst windows easier though, because even if you miss your positionals, you'll still get the Kenki that you need to use on specific skills, like Kaiten for example, which we're using that more often now because of a new skill that we've gotten. So your rotation won't be affected by missing positionals anymore. So I guess it does kind of make it easier, but you're still losing out on damage if you don't hit your positionals. Your AoE combo has also been made better. Not only do we have an upgrade to our combo starter, but both Mangetsu and Oka now apply the damage and attack speed buffs, whereas before they would only extend them. The upgrade to your combo starter also generates more Kenki than the previous version, and it's a circle AoE around you instead of a cleave in front of you. So it makes AoEing a lot easier as you don't have to reposition all the time, and the extra Kenki gauge will guarantee that you can use a Kaiten after 2 GCDs, and any excess you might have you can still spend on Q10 of course. Tenkagoken, your AoE EI Jutsu, is still a cleave though, so for that one you'll still have to reposition when you use it. Shoha, your meditation stack spender, has also been given an AoE version. I feel like they could have just made Shoha upgrade into an AoE skill instead, but I guess it's similar to Warrior, where we now have two different buttons, one for AoE and one for single target. I'm just happy that we got an AoE version. Meikyo Shisui has also been changed to now grant the damage and attack speed buffs when using Gecko and Kasha while under its effect, and this is one of the reasons why our rotation is going to be different. We've also been granted a second stack of Meikyo. Because it now applies these two buffs, it'll also be easier to keep the buffs up during a fight, so this is another change that made Samurai easier for the average player. So for our opener, we're actually using Meikyo pre-pull now, as we can immediately apply both buffs this way. To go with this, Tsubame Gaishi also got a second stack. Another thing they changed about Tsubame is that it no longer grants you a meditation stack, but we're getting that somewhere else, so no worries. The fact that both of these skills now have 2 stacks also lowers the barrier to entry for Samurai, because before, if you forgot to use Tsubame, you'd have to wait until you were able to get another Midari before you could use it and then make it go on cooldown. Now, even if you miss it, the cooldown will just keep going as you have 2 stacks now. Still going to mean that you'll lose out on any extra potency, because you're not using it under raid buffs for example, but at least you're not risking losing a usage of it or misaligning it for the rest of the fight. For our seasoned Samurai players, this doesn't really change much outside of the opener. In the opener we now use 2 Meikyos and 2 Tsubames, but after that we're back to using it once a minute. And then last but not least, we have Ogi Namakiri. This is a new EI Jutsu-like skill, but it's slightly different because it doesn't interact with our job gauge. Whenever we use Ikishoten, we're granted a 30-second buff during which we can use Ogi Namakiri. The skill itself is on its own separate button, and when you use it, it will also change into Kaeshi Namakiri, so it has its own Tsubame Gaishi button built into the same button. Both of these skills will deal AoE damage in a cone in front of you. So in other words, you use Ikishoten, that ability that grants you 50 Kenki gauge, you then use Kaiten to boost your EI Jutsu damage, and then you press the Ogi Namakiri button twice, one for the actual skill and a second time for the Kaeshi version. The skill itself feels incredibly satisfying, which might have to do with the fact that you get a little bit of screen shake when you use it, but it feels and it sounds impactful, which looking at the potency of these two skills, it should. Outside of just being an incredibly cool skill, this is another thing that impacts our rotation. Because it is tied to Ikishoten, we can only use it once every 2 minutes, meaning that our 1 minute loop will look slightly different from before. So we still have our filler combos like we used to have them previously, but we're changing when we're using them because Ogi Namakiri exists. On the loop, where we have Ogi Namakiri, we treat the skills like a 2 GCD filler. So depending on your skill speed, you will either need no filler or 1 or 2 filler GCDs when Ogi is up. On the loop, where we don't have it, you're either doing 2, 3 or 4 filler GCDs depending on your skill speed tier. So I do like that this changes your looping rotation a little bit. One thing I forgot to mention is that Sene and Guren now have half the Kenki cost. They used to cost 50 Kenki, but now they cost 25. And at first I thought this was just to make it easier, because I've had it happen plenty of times myself where I just spam the Shinten button a little bit too often, and now I need to gain 50 gauge before I can use either of these abilities. But because we're using Kaiten so often now during our 2-minute burst, it's actually really nice to have the cost reduction on Sene and Guren. And then of course, because they're cheaper, they also deal less damage now. But I think that covers just about all of the changes that happened, and I like everything that they have done. They've made it easier to play for those looking to get into Samurai, but for those that know what they are doing, not much has changed in terms of lowering the skill ceiling. The only thing I can think of is the fact that our buff uptime doesn't require much thinking anymore, but I think that's just about it. So I don't really have anything to complain about. Samurai still feels just as good as it did before, maybe even a little bit better, so it will see plenty of play from me. But with that, I've said everything I wanted to say, so I want to thank you for watching, I want to thank my Patreons for their support, and I'll see you in the next one.